Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Taanis Daf is a large daf which is primarily Agadata. The Gemara lists a number of stories about the great deeds of Talmidei Chachamim. Along the way, the Gemara discusses the concepts of staying out of a dangerous situation, not relying on your zechusim to save you. We'll also speak a little bit about being gentle, not being tough, and some acts of chesed that we've seen Talmidei Chachamim perform. So the Gemara begins the daf in the middle of the story of Nakdim ben Gurion, which we went through on Daf Yud Tes. Towards the end of the story, we saw that the Nachri, who had claimed that Nakdiman owed him a lot of silver, came to him and said that you owe me the money anyway, even though it rained, because the sun has already set. But what actually happened was that the sun was held up in the sky and the clouds separated, they parted, and the sun shone through in order to show that the sun had not set yet. So the Gemara says that Nakdiman ben Gorion's real name was actually Buni. He was called Nakdiman because Nikdima, the sun, stayed in the east, Kedem, the east, for a longer period of time than it usually would. It hung in the east longer. It was probably the west in which it hung, but it stayed eastward of having set fully, would be the intent, and that was in order that he should be saved from the claim of the Nachri. So the Gemara proceeds now and says, there's a price that says there were three people that had the sun stay up for them longer. It delayed from set. One was Nakdim ben Gurion, one was Yeshua ben Nun, and one was Moshe Rabbeinu. So Nakdim ben Gurion we've seen. Yeshua ben Nun, it says explicitly in the Psukim Sefer Yeshua, it says V'yidom Hashemesh V'yarach Omad, that the sun stayed in the sky and the moon froze, and that was part of Yeshua's Milchama in Emek Ayalon. Now, where do you see that Moshe Rabbeinu caused the sun to stop? So the Gemara brings three potential sources. It doesn't say explicitly anywhere. Two of them link to Yehoshua with a Gzeira Shava, and one of them is from the same pasuk innately. So the pasuk we will use is the pasuk in Devarim, which says, Hayom hazeh ochel teis pachtecha. On this day I begin to place the fear of you. Pachtecha v'yirascha al pnei ha'amim, your fear and your dread upon all the nations, tachas kol shemayim, under the sky. Sheyishmu and shimach, will hear about you, v'ragzu v'cholu mekan, they'll tremble and fear from before you. So the Gemara says, first of all, we could use the drasha of the word Ochel. This pasuk began with the word Ochel. By Yeshua, we also find the word Ochel because it says Ochel Gadlecha. So that's the pshat of Rabbi Elazar. Says Bishmol bar Nachmani, you could use the word Teis. This pasuk said Ochel Teis Pachtecha. And by Yeshua, we also see it says Biyom Teis Hashem Asa Amayri. Rabbi Yechon says you don't need any Gzeira Shava. The pasuk itself says that the nations are going to fear you because of what happened to you under the heavens. That shows that something specifically happened in the heavens that caused fear, and that's that the sun stood in its place. The Gemara now refers back to the Mishnah, which had commented that we should fast if one city receives rain and one city does not receive rain. We quoted a pasuk that said that would happen as part of a list of curses against Klal Yisrael. More says Rabbi Yehuda, says the name of Rav. You can understand both the rain and the lack of rain are both part of the curse. The place that has rain will have too much, and the place that has no rain will, of course, have too little. Now, Rabbi Yehuda here has interpreted something which could have been interpreted positively. He interpreted it negatively. The Gemara gives 4 examples of where there was a curse, which Rabbi Yehuda, named Rav, put a positive understanding on. So the first is in Eicha, where it says, Haisa Yerushalayim Nida, Beinayim, Yerushalayim was like a Nida. So he said that is a bracha because a Nida is separated from her husband, but not forever. She will come back to him, and he will come back to her, and therefore Yerushalayim will be restored together with the Kadosh Baruch Hu in the future. Next, he said, the pasuk says, Haisa ka'almana, same source in Eicha. It says that she was like a widow. It says Rabbi Yehuda Merav. It says this is just Rabbi Yehuda actually. This is also a bracha in disguise, a blessing in disguise. She's like an almana, but not really an almana. An almana has lost her husband forever, but this Klal Yisrael Yerushalayim has only lost her husband temporarily. We will come back together, so we're like an almana, but not a real almana. We're like somebody whose husband went to overseas, but will come back or intends to come back. Okay, next, Rabbi Yehuda explained the pasuk in Micha that says, "V'gamani nasati eschem nivzim v'shvalim." I will make you low and disgusting to the nations. So says Rav Yehuda, that's also bracha, that they will not appoint us to be tax collectors or toll collectors or policemen. We don't want those jobs. They won't appoint us to those positions because they view us in a low way. And the fourth pasuk, which he interprets positively, is V'hika Hashem es Yisrael kasher yoned hakona b'mayim. Hashem will strike the Jewish people as a reed waves in the water. It says Rav Yehuda, this is a bracha. How is there a bracha? Like Rav Shmuel ben Nachmani said in Rav Yonasan, that the blessing of an enemy is worse than the curse of a friend. This was a curse here, but it was said by Achia Shiloni, a tremendous Navi, a friend to Klal Yisrael. It was better than the blessing of Bilam, the wicked Bilam, who blessed us to be like a cedar tree. How so? So the Gemara says it's better to be a reed than it is to be a cedar tree. Why is that? A reed grows in tons of water. It always has plenty of water. Its trunk, if you cut it off, will grow back. It has a lot of roots, so it's firmly planted, and no matter how many winds blow at it, it'll bend in the wind, and when the wind stops, it's there. It didn't get knocked over, and it stays strong. There's a certain amount of resilience and flexibility in the reed, as opposed to a cedar tree, which does not have any of these things. A cedar tree does not live in water. It has a shortage of water. If you cut it off, it will not regenerate. It does not have a plentiful amount of roots, and although it can stand strong in a regular wind, if a strong wind blows, it'll knock it over on its face. So we would rather be like a reed as the curse of Achia Shiloni than as a cedar tree, the blessing of Bilam Harasha. Says the Gemara, the cedar is great for this reason. The reed, I should say, is great for this reason, and that is why the pen which we use to write a Sefer Torah, Sefer Nevi'im, Sefer Ksuvim is made from a reed. Now the Gemara brings another brayso that shows a way in which it's better to be like a reed than it is to be like a cedar. So the Gemara says a person should always be soft and flexible like a reed. It should not be tough and inflexible like a cedar. The Gemara brings an incident here that happened with Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. He had learned a lot of Torah in the house of his Rebbe in Migdal Gador. He was traveling away from there after this entire learning session, and he was riding his donkey on the back of the river, and he was having great joy, and he was proud of himself because of all the Torah that he learned. And that got him into trouble. So what happened? He met somebody who was very ugly, and he said to the ugly person, said to the Chacham, said to Rabbi Shimon, Shalom Alecha, Rebbe, greetings to you, Rebbe. He didn't answer him. He said, Reika, you empty person. How ugly is that guy? Maybe other people in your city are ugly just like you. So the ugly person said, I don't know, maybe. But if you have complaints, you should talk to the person who made me, and you should talk to the one, that is, who made me, and say, how ugly is this kli that you made? That was referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, obviously, who's responsible for how the man looks. So Rabbi Elazar realized that he had sinned, he did an avera, and he went down off the donkey he was riding, and he kneeled before the man, and he said, I spoke improperly, please forgive me. He said, I don't forgive you. I'm not going to forgive you until you go to the one who made me and tell him you made an ugly kli. Meaning until you die. So Rabbi Elazar followed after him and continued asking him to forgive him. He followed him until the man got to his hometown. The people of the hometown saw Rabbi Elazar approaching. They came out and they said, Shalom Alecha, Rebbe, Mary, greetings to you, great Talmid Chacham. So the ugly man said, why? Who are you calling Rebbe? So they said, this guy behind you. Not this guy, this Talmid Chacham behind you is a tremendous Talmid Chacham, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. So he said, if he's a Rebbe, so there should not be many more like him in Israel. I said, why do you say that? And he related the whole story, and they advised him, be meichelim, because he's a great Talmid Chacham, he made a mistake, but you should have mercy on him and be meichelim anyway. So he said, okay, I'll be meichelim for your sake, on the condition that he does not do this again. He shouldn't do such things like he did with me. So when Elazar Shimon achieved mechila, he went to the Beis Medrash, and he said, a drasha, a person should always be flexible like a reed and not tough like a cedar, as opposed to how he had been. And he said, and that merit, because of that, the pen used to write a Sefer Torah, Tefillin, and Mezuzah is made out of a reed. Okay, the Gemara now refers back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that we fast if there's a spate of collapsing structures. So the Gemara says it only refers to strong structures, not to weak structures. It only refers to structures that shouldn't be falling. It doesn't refer to structures which are expected to fall. So Gemara says, what does this repetition here. Strong, not weak. Expected to stand, not expected to fall. It's the same thing. Someone says, no, there's a difference. There's such a thing as a weak structure that's expected to stand, and there's such a thing as a strong structure that's expected to fall. Strong structure that's expected to fall would be one that is built very well, but it's too tall. It's high, and because it's high, it's unbalanced, and it's going to fall. Another example would be a very strong structure, but it's built on the side of the river, and the rushing river has weakened its foundations, it's going to fall. Those would not be a reason to fast if they fell because we expect them to fall. An example of a weak structure which stands is the wall. There was a very weak wall in a Nahardah, and Rav and Shmuel used to be careful not to walk under the wall because it may collapse at any time, but the wall stood for 13 years. So Gemara relates that one day Rav and Shmuel were walking together with Rav Ada bar Ava, and they came to the wall, and Shmuel said to Rav, let's go around it like usual, and he said, no, this time we can go under it because Rav Ada bar Ava is with us. He has a tremendous amount of merit. I'm not afraid that it's going to collapse on him and us together. Now, speaking of the merit of Rav Ada bar Ava and how it helped prevent things to collapse, Gemara relates an incident. Rav Huna, who had a tremendous stock of wine, was a wine merchant, so he had some wine stored in a building that was in the danger of collapse. He wanted to move the wine out, but he couldn't go into the building because of the danger. So what he did was he engaged Rav Ada bar Ava in a Torah conversation, and he walked with him to the building, and they went together into the building. There he was confident that it wouldn't collapse because Rav Ada bar Ava was there. He finished the conversation while he was busy moving out the wine, moved out all the wine, and as soon as they walked out of the building, it fell. Rav Ada bar Ava then understood that he'd been used, and he was upset, because he held like Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai says that a person should never go into a dangerous place and say, oh, I'll merit a miracle. First of all, you might not. And second of all, even if you do, it'll take away from your zechusim. It'll detract from your merits. Like we saw that Yaakov said, Kantoti mikol chasadim mikol emes, I've been shrunk, I've lost my zechusim, or some of them, from all the chesed and the truth that Kadosh Baruch Hu has done with me, and the house of Lavan, and saving me from Esau. So therefore he didn't want to lose his chusim, and he was upset that he'd been used that way. So Gemara now wants to know what are the great merits of Rav Ada bar Ava. So Gemara says that the Talmidim asked Rabbi Zera, and some say they asked Rav Ada bar Ava, what is it that kept you around for so long? How have you merited such a long life? And he listed a number of things. He said, first of all, I was never angry in my house. Certainly I was never angry anywhere else. I never showed any sense of strictness in my house. I never walked in front of somebody who's greater than me. I never thought words of Torah in a filthy alley, in an alley where there's refuse, where it's forbidden to think words of Torah, or it's forbidden to speak, and as a chumrah even to think. I never walked 4 amas without Torah or tefillin. I never slept in a beis medrash, not a nap and not a long sleep. And I was never happy when one of my friends had a downfall, and I never called a friend of mine by a nickname, not a nickname that I made up, and not a nickname that somebody else made up, or even a general one. I didn't use those names. So now the Gemara notes that although Rav Huna relied on the matter of Ada bar Ava, Rav Huna himself was a great man. The Gemara says that Rava said to Rav from Bar Papa, tell us some of the great deeds of Rav Huna. So he said, I don't remember the things he did when he was young, but I can tell you some of the things that he did in his older years. Every time it was cloudy and it looked like there was a storm coming, he would go and inspect all the walls, all the buildings in this city in where he lived. They would carry him around in a golden chair. Mepharshim explained that was in order to impress the Goyim that they should respect his decisions and his rules. They would carry him around in a golden chair to inspect all the walls. Any wall that was in a danger of collapse in the storm, he would order demolished. And then if the person who owned it could rebuild it on his own, he would. If not, Rav Huna would finance the rebuilding of the wall or structure on his own. Now, another thing he did was every Friday he would send a messenger to the market when the market was about to close to buy all the vegetables there. He did that in order that the vegetable merchants should gain a profit, and they would be encouraged to bring more vegetables to the market the next time, and they wouldn't lose money on the vegetables and any produce that they couldn't sell. Now, what did he do with the vegetables? So he threw them in the river. They floated it downstream, and other people along the stream were able to take them. So Gemara asks, why did he throw them in the river? Why didn't he give them to the poor people in his town? Gemara says, if he did that, then those people would rely on receiving it every Erev Shabbos, and sometimes there wouldn't be any Erev Shabbos. If there was nothing left in the market, it wouldn't have anything, and therefore he didn't want to do that. Gemara said, why didn't he feed it to the animals? Gemara answers, he held that animals should not be given people food. People food fed to animals would be Baltashkas. Better throw them in the river and let other people get them. So Gemara says, another thing that Rav Huna used to do was that he had a container of medication, or if he had a specific medication, he would hang it on his door and say whoever needs should come and take. A different version of this is that he put water there because he understood the ways of the demon called Shivta, we used to attack anybody who didn't wash his hands, so he hung water in a pail, and he would say anybody who needs water to wash should come and wash their hands. Gemara says another thing he used to do was that whenever he ate bread, he would open the door of his house and he would sit there and say, anybody who needs to eat, come eat with me. Now Rava commented that these are great deeds of Rav Huna. I could have done the same thing. The only thing I couldn't do was the last one, to share my bread with everybody, because there are too many poor people in Machuzah where I live, and it would be too much difficult.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.